I knew it, Furley said, his voice surprisingly quiet. I knew there was too much vibration in that building. My brother Bart is going to be very disappointed. Mr. Furley, please, Janet said, stepping forward. We only lied because we wanted to stay together. We're a family. Furley sighed, a long, dramatic sound that seemed to deflate his purple suit. A family, Tripper. You've caused me more headaches than a bad case of shingles. You lied to my face. You sold my bed. You made me judge a Swiss man who looked like a lettuce leaf. He adjusted his ascot one last time. But I suppose I can't have a vacant apartment. And if I kick you out, who else would make me Romanian dinner and sing that ridiculous song? Jack's eyes widened. You mean we can stay? Under one condition, Furley said, a glimmer of his usual self returning. No more lies. And I want a 10% truth tax on the rent for the next 3 months. Deal! Jack and Janet shouted in unison. Chapter 19. The New Normal. The walk back to Adobe Lane was different this time. There was no rain, and there was no need to hide in the shadows. When they got back to 304, Chrissy was waiting for them, wearing a detective's hat and holding a magnifying glass. Agent Snow reporting. Did we win? Is the tomb still closed? Chrissy, Janet laughed, pulling her into a hug. You can take off the hat. The tomb is open. Furley knows everything. He does? Chrissy's eyes went wide. Are we going to prison? Do they have orange juice in prison? No prison, Jack said, wrapping an arm around Janet. We're staying, all of us, and I don't have to be refined anymore. Oh, thank goodness, Chrissy sighed. Because I really wanted to tell you that your silk pajamas are actually very itchy looking. They stood on the balcony, the three of them, looking out at the Pacific. The golden hour had long since passed, replaced by a deep, velvet blue. The glass sculpture had finally shattered, but in its place, something stronger had been built. You know, Janet whispered, leaning her head on Jack's shoulder. We're still a crowd. Yeah, Jack smiled, looking at Chrissy, who was currently trying to use the magnifying glass to look at a moth. But we're the best crowd I know. Epilogue. The Last Midnight. Downstairs, Ralph Furley sat in his neon purple armchair. He was looking at a photograph of the Ropers, wondering if they ever had nights where the vibrations felt so honest. Tripper and Wood, Furley mused, closing his eyes. A chef and a florist. It's almost poetic, in a very loud, expensive sort of way. He reached over and turned off the lamp. Good vibrations. Finally, and upstairs, in the apartment at 201 Adobe Lane, the light on the balcony remained on. 3 people know, a family sat together, finally at peace in the home they had fought so hard to keep. Because in the end, 3 wasn't just a crowd. It was everything they ever needed. The company we keep. A novel of misunderstandings and midnights in Santa Monica. Prologue. The golden hour. The sun was a bruised orange, sinking slowly into the Pacific and casting long, amber shadows across the salt-dusted balconies of Santa Monica. At the apartment complex on 2018 Adobe Lane, the air smelled of sea spray and cheap cologne. For Jack Tripper, this was the hour of possibility. It was the time when the day's failures in the kitchen of the cooking school faded, replaced by the chaotic, comforting domesticity of the home he shared with 2 women who were simultaneously the loves of his life and the banes of his existence. Their arrangement was a fragile glass sculpture, held together by a singular, elaborate lie, that Jack, the bumbling, blue-eyed chef in training, was as uninterested in the feminine charms of his roommates as he was in a burnt soufflé. To the world, and specifically to the landlord, he was a man of different persuasions. In reality, Jack was a man starving in a banquet hall, surrounded by the 2 most beautiful women he'd ever known, bound by a vow of platonic secrecy that kept a roof over their heads. But tonight, the glass was about to crack. Chapter 1. The Garage Sale of Souls. Jack, you didn't. Janet Wood stood in the center of the living room, her hands on her hips, her dark hair bobbed perfectly in a style that screamed sensible yet chic. She was the anchor of the trio, the florist who knew how to make things grow even when the soil was rocky. I did, Jack said, leaning against the kitchen counter, trying and failing to look suave. They said we could do whatever we wanted with it. It's not junk, Jack, Chrissy Snow chimed in, floating into the room like a daydream. She was blonde, ethereal, and possessed a logic that existed on a plane of reality 3 steps to the left of everyone else. Or at least, very old. It was a pile of moth-eaten velvet and lamps that looked like they belonged in a haunted bordello, Jack countered, and a junk dealer just hauled half of it away. Look, he produced a wad of cash from his pocket, waving it like a trophy. This, ladies, is the rent. We are safe. We are secure. We are wealthy enough for a pizza. The celebration was short-lived. A heavy, rhythmic thudding began at the front door. It wasn't the polite knock of a neighbor. It was the sound of destiny, or perhaps an angry bill collector demanding entry. When Janet opened the door, a man stood there who looked like he had been dressed by a colorblind disco dancer. His leisure suit was a shade of apricot that shouldn't exist in nature, and his ascot was tied with the precision of a man who took his leisure very seriously. "Can I help you?" Janet asked, blinking against the glare of the apricot polyester. "The name is Furley," the man said, his voice a vibrating baritone. "Ralph Furley. I'm the new manager. My brother, Bart, bought the building, but I'm the one running the tight ship. Landlord, resident, and guardian of the peace." Jack stepped forward, his stomach doing a slow somersault. "Mr. Furley, welcome. We were just discussing the building's aesthetics." Furley's eyes scanned the room, landing on a small, empty space near the window. "Where is it?" "Where is what?" Chrissy asked innocently. "My furniture!" Furley shrieked, his voice jumping an octave. "My priceless treasures. I had my brother move my things into the garage until my apartment downstairs was finished. A velvet armchair, a matching set of luau lulu lamps, a bed that had been in the Furley family for generations. The silence that followed was heavy enough to sink a ship. Jack looked at the wad of cash in his hand. The junk hadn't belonged to the Ropers. He had just sold the new landlord's entire life to a man in a truck with the word junk painted on the side. "You," Furley said, pointing a trembling finger at Jack. "You look like a man with a guilty conscience, or a very bad haircut." "Mr. Furley," Jack squeaked, his voice cracking. "There's been a small Romanian misunderstanding." Chapter 2. The Romanian Ruse. The threat of eviction hung over the apartment like a guillotine. "He's going to throw us out." Janet paced the kitchen, her heels clicking a frantic rhythm. "Tomorrow is the 1st of the month. We're going to be on the street, Jack. Living in a van, or worse, living with your mother." "I have a plan," Jack said, though his eyes betrayed his terror. "Furley is a bachelor, a man about town, or so he thinks, and he's obsessed with Lana Shields." Lana was their neighbor, a woman who wore silk wraps like armor and possessed a feline grace that made Jack's knees weak and Furley's heart stop. She was sophisticated, older, and had absolutely no interest in a man who wore apricot leisure suits. "We throw a dinner party," Jack explained, his hands gesturing wildly. "A quiet, intimate, candlelit dinner for 2. We invite Lana. We tell her Jack Tripper is the chef. But when she gets here, we pivot. We set her up with Furley. She'll kill us," Chrissy said. "Not if she thinks it's a chouette à la mode evening," Jack said. "It's a French-Romanian gourmet experience. Very exclusive, very romantic. Furley gets the girl, we get to keep our apartment." The evening was a masterpiece of desperation. The apartment was transformed. Scented candles struggled to mask the smell of Jack's frantic cooking. Janet and Chrissy were dressed as Romanian waitresses, which mostly involved wearing too many petticoats and attempting accents that sounded vaguely like they were having strokes. Lana arrived, looking like a dream in midnight blue. "Jack, darling, I hope the main course is as delicious as the chef." Jack ushered her to the table, where Furley sat, wearing a ruffled shirt that made him look like an aggressive carnation. "Lana, my dear," Furley purred, leaning in so far he nearly dipped his ascot in the wine. "I've been waiting for a night like this, to feel your good vibrations." Lana's expression was one of frozen horror. She looked at Jack, pleading. In Romania, Jack shouted, appearing from the kitchen with a platter, it is tradition for the chef to sit at the table and for the waitresses to sing. Chrissy and Janet burst into the room, clapping their hands. Yum, 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 hey, they chanted, a frantic, rhythmic dance that involved a lot of knee slapping. In Romania, we love to dance. It's the country of romance. Grab your partner and take a spin. Then sit right down and have your din. The night descended into a fever dream of cultural inaccuracies. Furley, emboldened by 3 glasses of Romanian wine, which was actually just cheap Chianti with a splash of root beer, began to believe he was truly the Casanova of Santa Monica. Lana, trapped by her own politeness and a very strong desire to see what Jack was doing with the dessert, endured the ordeal. By midnight, the miracle happened. Furley, convinced that the trio were his best friends and cultural ambassadors, rescinded the eviction notice. "You're good kids," Furley slurred, leaning against the doorframe as he prepared to head downstairs. "A little weird, a little foreign, but good kids, and Lana, she loves me. I can tell. She called me a worm, which in Romania, I assume, is a term of endearment." As the door closed, Jack sank onto the sofa, covered in flour and sweat. Janet sat beside him, kicking off her shoes. "We're safe," she whispered. "For now," Jack replied, looking at the empty wine bottles. "But I think I'm going to have nightmares about that Yum Yum song for the rest of my life."